All right, moving and shooting at night, it is the exact same thing as moving and shooting in the daytime. All you want to really focus on is not disturbing your lower half and making a bounce from the ground all the way up. So it's just a slight level change, and I kind of get everything a little bit wider than normal, kind of like I'm in my stance, but then I'm picking my feet up low off the ground. I'm not lifting high, because if I lift high, I start to bounce, right? See this, if I'm the just walk mentality is not true. Just walking is not conducive to separating lower half from my upper half and keeping the shooting platform stable. So what I try to do is just keep my legs or my feet low off the ground. And that way you won't disturb your upper half. Just kind of keeps everything nice and smooth, almost like you're skating.
Typically, you want to either be shooting or moving, but you may be in a situation where you need to shoot while you're moving.
Unlike the movies, shooting on the move is kind of has a limited application. Okay, so it's actually rather difficult to do, and in most cases, what you're going to want to do is shoot from whatever barricade you have, move as fast as you can to your next position to cover, and then engage, move, post, shoot. When I'm going forward, I'm going to lower my center of gravity. I'm going to slightly bend my knees, and I'm going to roll my feet to try and keep my upper body from the waist up as stable as possible.
Got it.
So that way my sights don't bounce up and down. So let's say I'm moving forward. Lower my center of gravity. I'm going to roll my feet, keeping my muzzle as straight as possible.
Moving and shooting. In a gunfight, it's probably a good idea not to stay stationary because you're just making an easy target for your opponent to shoot at. So we want to move, but we want to be able to shoot while we're moving. Ideally, you want to move quickly to cover and use the cover to shoot from. But if you don't have that, you can advance on or move under the cover of your own fire. Okay, and we want to be as accurate as we possibly can. So as we do this, you're going to think about your knees as being shock absorbers. Okay, we talk about our good gunfighting stance being on the balls of our feet, not on our heels. Same idea here, moving. You don't really have a stance, but you want to keep the weight on the balls of your feet and use your knees to keep your eyes on a nice even level so you're not bouncing up and down. Okay, so with two eyes open and red dot sights, help out a lot. Got your good fighting stance. Hell, get it all ready to go. Be off safe, finger off the trigger, then start. Take a few steps and just practice keeping your eyes right where they're supposed to be. So you notice as I'm stepping, I'm rolling from my heel to my toe, trying to be as smooth as possible. Think about, when you're a kid and you're sneaking up behind your buddy and smacking him in the back of the head. Well, that's the kind of stance you want to be in. You're sneaking up. It's like tiptoeing, whatever you got to, say to yourself to put you in that condition. Okay, now I'm going to squeeze the trigger as the red dot comes onto the target. It's not timed with any kind of step. So you don't want to step on the left foot or between shots, take your shot. No, the target may not present itself at that point. But when you can make a clean shot, that's when you squeeze the trigger. All right, so we'll do it one more time. So you take those steps. Okay, there's a lot more to this, but if you can do those two things, keeping your eyes at a nice level and walking smoothly, taking shots when you see the good sight picture, okay, and just get used to that. Now, as you get closer and the target gets bigger, you can increase the tempo and shoot a little bit faster, okay, but you want to have that shot available to you whenever the target presents itself in your sights, not when your foot hits the ground.
So one, you need to bend your knees to act as natural shock absorbers. You want to roll from heel to toe, okay, with your feet. But now that was moving forward. Now let's assume that we are moving laterally, okay? There are different ways to move laterally, all right? You can move sidestepping, or you can actually orient your hips in the direction that you're moving, okay? And we're going to treat those separately. There's a time and place to actually shoot this way, all right? And then there's a time and place to actually point your hips or orient your hips to the direction that you're moving, okay? We're going to discuss the second scenario here where I'm orienting my hips towards where I'm going to be moving, all right? Now, you will probably hear this, and there's nothing wrong with this, where people will say, if you are going to be moving and shooting, orient your toes to where the direction that you're moving, which is correct, because that also, wherever I move my toes, typically speaking, that's where I'm going to orient my hips. So if I was moving to my left, your right, my toes would be pointed in that direction, my hips get oriented there, and I'm able to move, okay, effectively and efficiently. But there is an issue moving laterally if you keep your toes pointed in one direction here. And let me demonstrate here, okay? So I'm actually going to step back a little bit so we have some room here. And let's say you're my target here. I'm just going to use my air pistol right here. What happens is, if I keep both of my feet oriented, I'm doing the same walk that Coach had talked about, heel to toe, knees as shock absorbers, trying to keep my head on the same level, okay? And what's going to happen is, both of my toes are oriented, so you're my target. I do this. If I keep my toes oriented here, notice right about here, I get kind of jammed up, bundled up, tied up. It's very hard. Now, as soon as I pass you, I can't engage you without doing this. Okay, it's very hard. I'll have to twist. My body positioning gets ruined. Okay, so the variation that I'm going to teach you is this. If my target is on my right side, I want to point my foot, my leg closest to the target. So in this case, you, the viewer here, is actually going to be pointed towards you, the toes, kind of on a 45-degree angle, or you can go even a little bit more than a 45-degree angle. My other leg continues to point in the same direction that I want to travel. Now notice what happens here. You're going to do the same exact thing, knees as shock absorbers, and you're still rolling from heel to toe, but notice now I'm in front of you, and I'm actually very comfortable here. I can even go past you and still shoot. Okay. The reason why is it's a little bit of a cheat here. By turning my leg this way, I'm able to turn my hip out a little bit, okay, while still orienting towards the direction I want to go to. So from this viewpoint here, if my target was over here and I'm walking towards you, so I'm no longer straight like this with my legs, okay, I'm not doing this, I'm actually cheating it. This comes out a little bit. And that makes it so much more comfortable. And just the same thing here, if I'm going left, okay, I'm going to your left, my right. So traditionally, if you were my target, I'm going to point at my target, I start walking. Both toes are oriented towards the direction I want to go to, but notice right about here, I get bundled up. Actually, if I pass you, I cannot turn. I would have to let go, shoot this way, or some weird position. Okay? Now, if I use the other technique here, where my lead foot or the leg closest to you is on a 45-degree angle, so I've exposed the hip a little bit, I'm here, take a look at this. I can be past you already and I'm still comfortable. I can still shoot you in this good shooting platform. All right? So, everything else is the same in terms of moving and shooting. Okay, the basics of it. Knees as shock absorbers, rolling from heel to toe, okay? Now all you're going to do is, instead of moving forward like this, as you saw in a previous video with Coach, we are now going to orient the target, the leg closest to the target, a little bit 45 degrees. And you can begin to walk this way. Okay, if I'm going this way, everything stays the same. I want to keep my head level, all right, and just roll heel to toe. And that way you'll be able to effectively get your shots on target without getting bundled up here as you pass. All right, so let's see how it looks like live. So as you can see, there's no magic to it. It's just really simple. The same idea of that heel to toe, using our knees as shock absorbers, but all we are doing is orienting our hips slightly towards the target by changing the position of where our lead foot, or the leg closest to our target, is facing the toes, okay? So we're just opening it up a little bit, and that makes the world of difference.
Sometimes situations dictate that you need to shoot on the move. In a team environment, I can't stop in a doorway and shoot into a room because my teammates are going to run in the back of me, and and just mess up my shot, and I'm gonna jack them up. So it's just better to get more guns in the room. And when I'm shooting on the move, the pace is the pace. It doesn't change no matter what I'm doing. It's faster than most people think or are used to, but what happens typically is people start moving through houses that are clear, and then when they go to shoot, their pace slows down. That's not the case. It has to be the same. Everything's the same as I'm moving through, because you don't know when a threat's gonna appear. The further I am away from the target, my cadence might be a little slower because my dot leaves the box. And as I get closer, my dot doesn't leave the box, so I can speed that up. So your pace has to remain the same, but your rate of fire should speed up as you go. You shouldn't try to keep that same rate of fire. There'll be like 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I keep that going, but as I get closer, I can speed up. I'm meeting my requirements to break the shot. So keeping that pace, you gotta think of reality. You're pushing straight on somebody, you might have to shoot off to the side, you might have to do a lot of different things. So keeping those good priorities and cadences of knowing what you can do and get away with, that's how you start making good shots on the move. To start out, as I'm moving, shorten my strides and narrow my stance, because I'm looking at the target and watching my dot and seeing what it's doing. I'm just kind of looking to see what's happening on my movement side. I want to get the movement down right first. So as I'm moving, if I'm going, elbow to elbow on the target, then I need to shrink in my side because I'm bouncing. And if it's going from like, chest to pelvis, chest to pelvis, chest to pelvis, that means my stride's too long and I'm probably having a good heel strike. So I got a nice smooth out my walk heel to toe, good bend in my legs. I like to think of like an Abrams tank. It's locked in, the turret's locked in, barrel's locked, and then the tracks are just running underneath it. And that's kind of how I try to build my stance and my walk around that.
We're going to be talking about shooting and moving, and then I'll talk about some of the mechanics involved with moving and staying steady and level and keeping that good sight picture while you're moving. In a real world or tactical sense, it's hard to just stop when other people are counting on you to move. My background as a Green Beret, there was a lot of CQB or close quarters battle involved, where you're moving with a team in tight quarters and you're taught to get out of the fatal funnel, which is the door, which is where all the bad guys' weapons would be pointing if I was entering that door. So I have to keep moving so I don't impede progress, all right? And also, you're moving to a point where you're generally on line, so it's safer for the people around you or on the team with you in that close quarters, so you're not shooting towards each other, you're all shooting towards one spot. But as I said before, moving in a real world scenario where there's people around you, or you have to get angles to make sure you got good shots because you're not on a range like this, or you're working with teammates where you have to get generally on line or get out of that fatal funnel, you can't impede progress, you have to keep moving. And you see my movement was very slow and methodical, heel to toe, and my trigger finger was fast. As we say in the CQB world, none of my movements as a body has to be fast, just aligning the sights and getting on that trigger has to be fast. That's all it takes to be quicker. So talking about mechanics for moving, maintaining a stable chassis up top and absorbing that shock with the heel toe, bent knees, and turning at the hips to engage my targets, whether it be left or right, straight ahead. I've got my hands up and I've rolled my shoulders and put my chin down a little bit, much like a fighter, and I'm just rolling heel to toe on my feet and using my knees being bent as shock absorbers so the top of my body can remain level. A good drill around the house so you don't freak out the wife and kids. My old crusty Sergeant Major showed me this. He said, so you scare everybody in the house, we could take a water bottle, we can take some water out of it, and you can see I can get a general good grip as if I'm holding a pistol on this water bottle, and I've got the water level, and then I start moving heel toe, bending my knees to absorb that shock, and I can move faster as I get better at it. And I'm trying to keep that water fairly level. And I'm sucking at it right now, and it's making me thirsty, but it's a good drill to do.
The real key to shooting on the move, now as far as we're concerned, is stabilize the muzzle on the target. Don't lose sight of that. You gotta stabilize the muzzle. So really when we're talking about movement, it's waist down. from my waist up, my body is like a turret on a tank perhaps. So I've got my gun locked onto the target, and my movement should really be from my base down, from my hips down. That's doing all the movement. I'm stepping up over things, I'm running, I'm walking, whatever it is I'm doing, and my upper body is staying locked on the target best I can to try to stabilize that muzzle. And that, it can be a little bit of a challenge, all right? So you need to be able to walk without flopping the gun around so much. If I just take a normal walk, if I were to just, you know, walk normal, my gun's probably gonna bounce in my hand a little bit. So I'm gonna have to change that up if I wanna walk and shoot at the same time.
Walk through the steps. I know that you've got to move and be stable. Is there something you do with your lower body to make yourself more stable?
I'm trying to be as smooth as possible. You know, ideally, I want to look like I'm standing on a skateboard and somebody's pulling me across the parking lot. So basically, without getting too technical with it, I'm just going to kind of roll my feet on the ground. I'm going to kind of, instead of slapping my feet, which we don't walk like that anyway, I'm going to kind of roll my heels, so heel-toe movement across the ground. I'm going to kind of try to glide. So I'm trying to glide across the ground as smooth as possible. In a lot of cases, if you kind of lower your base a little bit, the knees kind of act as the shock absorbers, and that movement won't be as static or as stringent. You can kind of use those knees as shock absorbers and roll my feet across the ground as I move. That certainly helps whether you're going forward or back. If I'm moving backwards, I'm kind of doing a toe-heel type of movement as opposed to heel-toe type of movement. But maybe a movement just to kind of get off a line of attack, or a quick movement to the side, something like that. I think that's more practical movement, and I'm trying to do that, and I'm trying to do it smooth. Trying to stabilize my upper body, keep it locked on, and then move my legs and my feet without disturbing that muzzle too much. We don't get too hung up on the details of specifically how to walk and all that stuff. It's not practical.
What would you do to train that? What kind of things maybe do you do on the range that?
Sure, we started off real simple when we're teaching shooting on the move to get people ready for competitive shooting or things like that. We'll start with just some forward and back type of movement, and then some lateral movement. With forward and back, we're talking straight on with the target or back from the target, just to keep it real simple. So as I'm moving in on the target, I'm just looking for heel-toe movement, and we want to move at a pace that's practical for competition or practical for defensive. So I don't want to be moving so slow that I'm like molasses, because that's not practical. Specifically when we're teaching shooting on the move, if I had a target, you know, facing in front of me, I'm simply looking for heel-toe movement, and as I move, heel-toe movement, going forward or going back, I'm trying to stabilize that upper body. So we've got a tank turret type of analogy here, stabilizing the muzzle on the target, and heel-toe movement, so I'm smooth, so I'm not smacking my feet and the gun's not wobbling all around. So we'll do drills where we're going forward and back on the range. Real simple. We'll start slow, start dry, and then we'll move it up to live fire. And then we'll do lateral movement. With lateral movement, we see this sometimes on the range or out at training courses. We see folks doing this. I'm not sure the practicality of that type of movement. If you need to move from here to here, why don't you just get there, move, and then take your shots? And if I need to move and shoot simultaneously, well, I don't walk like this normally, and I don't think anybody does or anything like that. So just get there. You know, if I need to move from here to there and shoot a couple shots, why not just move? Get the gun out and stabilize your base and move. So when we do drills with lateral shooting, going across the range, which is certainly more difficult, I'm still trying to keep my upper body and my torso locked onto the target. So if I'm moving from here towards you and I need to be shooting that way, I'm shooting this way and simply just moving. And my feet and my body is going to change based on how far away I get to the target. I'm going this way, it's the same thing. So I may be kind of stepping backwards or moving across the range, something like that. So we'll do drills to enforce that.
Good.
When we start talking about shooting on the move, guys, what we're talking about doing is isolating the movement with our legs and the movement of the gun. And we do that through a couple of key things. One, we want to bend our knees and our legs so they can act as shock absorbers as we move across the ground. Two, what really is helpful is if you work on reaching out and pulling yourself across the ground versus pushing yourself across the ground. When we push ourselves across the ground, we normally let that lead foot hit with more impact, and that creates a bounce that comes up through your body and translates out to the barrel of the gun. So again, bend those knees, reach out in front of yourself, and pull yourself across the ground. Now, when we're backing up and we're working on
retreating. We have to be very careful. This can be very dangerous because under duress, we could fall and make the situation much worse on ourselves. But if we are going to shoot while backing up, we want to, again, reach behind us, reducing the chances of tripping, and land on our toe and roll toe to heel as we back up. The next thing we want to talk about is shooting laterally to the target. The issue that we have there is when we're moving, it's better for us to keep our feet pointing in the direction that we're moving, but we have to shoot off to the side of the direction where we're moving. That causes our body to get bound up. So again, in general, keep your feet pointed in the direction you're moving, but you may have to turn them a little bit. Eventually, you're going to get very bound up in how far you can shoot laterally to the target. You basically have two choices, or two good choices. One is to turn around and back out of the problem, and two is to haul butt and get to where you need to be. So guys, shooting while moving is a critical skill. People don't stand still in a gunfight, so get out there and work at it.
The first thing when we start talking about shooting on the move, I want you to think of it conceptually. The whole concept here is to try to move as smoothly as possible so that you don't disturb the alignment of the gun. So if you put your imagination hat on and imagine you're that M1 Abrams tank, what we're trying to do is have our track system pull us across the ground while our high-speed computer keeps the muzzle or the barrel or the sights in line with the target so that we can fire effectively. You're going to walk relatively normal, heel to toe, rolling your foot outside to inside, but we need to keep those knees bent more than you probably normally would do when you walk. That's going to help absorb that recoil, okay? Be cautious of getting your feet wide apart. When your legs are too far apart, that causes a teeter-totter on the top end of your body. So keep your feet relatively close together, basically right in your hip sockets while you're moving, and that'll prevent that teeter-totter from happening. When we're talking about moving forward, I want you to think about the concept of reaching out in front of you and pulling yourself across the ground versus pushing yourself across the ground. When you push yourself across the ground, that next leg hits and has a lot more impact. If you get your foot out in front of you, there's not as much weight on it when it contacts the ground. It's less impact, and you pull yourself across the ground instead of push yourself across the ground. The term that's used by a lot of military and law enforcement guys that do a lot of shooting on the move is a careful hurry, meaning I only want to move as fast as I can shoot accurately. Otherwise, I should be either slow down and shoot accurately or stop shooting and move really fast. Otherwise, you're just not being effective. You should also be able to shoot while you are retreating from your target, meaning backing away as you shoot. The reason for that is if you get into a situation where you're very close with someone and it does turn into a gunfight, the terminology that I like to use is proximity negates skill. If you are too close to your adversary, they need little or no skill to shoot you. When you turn your back on your adversary, you're of absolutely no threat to them at all anymore, and it becomes an unfair gunfight to their advantage. So retreating is a good skill to have so that you can create distance while you're still engaging with accurate fire. The argument against it is you might fall down when you're doing that. That's true. But in the meantime, I'm still placing accurate fire on my adversary. So once again, let's talk about this. Moving forward, I want to pull myself across the ground and try to maintain a very stable platform. When I am backing up, I want to put my foot behind me, behind my center of gravity, land toe to heel, and move backwards, trying to be stable. Move! Now we need to work on moving laterally to the target. You've
you know, there's a high probability, especially if someone's, you got there, it's not going to be a very linear event going straight towards your target or straight away from the threat, if you will. So we need to be able to work moving laterally to the target. When we are moving laterally to the target, things get a little bit more complicated because now we're trying to shoot in a direction different from where we're moving. So when we start moving, our hips want to turn in the direction that we're shooting, but our feet kind of need to be pointed in the direction that we're moving. So we kind of have to twist our bodies a little bit. For a right-handed shooter, shooting to our left, for example, if I'm here, I need to shoot to the left and move in this direction. This is the easier direction for me to go because I can kind of quasi-weaver my stance, still keep my feet pointed in the direction I'm moving and engage pretty easily, you know, up to a point. When we switch that around and I am shooting to my right, when I go to shoot in this direction, what you guys will find is you're gonna bind up much sooner, right? It's kind of hard to do that weaver position to the right-hand side. If I'm shooting to my right while I'm moving to my left, if I will raise and cant the gun and raise that inside elbow, it opens the scapula up and it gives me a few more degrees of rotation before my body binds up. It's not dramatic, but it is helpful. When I am shooting to my right and I get bound up, what I normally advise for most people is just to turn around and back up to where you need to be. All right, hopefully behind cover. So we are going to make a figure eight. We're gonna start in the middle and we're gonna make a figure eight around the barrels as we shoot 2 full magazines at the target that's directly in front of you. These are obstacles. This is not cover. So when you do your reload, just continue to move. Don't try to like duck mount down behind the barrels or anything like that.